Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Vancouver Real. I am your co-host today, Mike Zaremba, and usually with me, is my brother Andy at the helm.
Unfortunately, I don't have a camera today because we have 4 people around the table and we have an aerial cam. So I'm going to look up and wave to everybody out there right now. Hopefully don't lose my audio. And so I'm really excited about today's episode. This is going to be awesome.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one for a while. And as usual, we're podcasting here out of Float House at 70 West Cordova Street in Vancouver, BC. Float House is a commercial float center. We were the first ones actually in Vancouver, and now it's kind of a North American-wide trend is these flotation centers coming up. And basically, if you haven't heard of flotation therapy, it's a experience where you go into a external sensory reduced environment. And this causes a pretty strong reaction to our bodies, to our physiologies, to our psychologies, and predominantly for stress management, relaxation. So if you're curious to learn more about floating, check out floathouse.com, and you can find a whole plethora of information on there and what it can be applied towards. So that's all I got to say about that.
Yeah, and I want to just touch on quickly the Vancouver Real meetups that are going on. Right. We're doing monthly meetups, and they are free for the most part. We just completed one. It was a habits building workshop, which is fantastic. We had maybe 25 people out, and we did a whole workshop getting people set up for the new year for success. So that was really great. Yeah. The next one we have is going to be at Juice Truck, and it's going to be all about nutrition. So this should be a really excellent one. And so just connect with us on Facebook, and we'll post the event on there, or join the Vancouver Real Meetups group page, and then you'll get a faster notification when we have these things out, and you're not just relying on social media. Mm-hmm. And it's really awesome to have this community kind of building outside of just the podcast. It's great to have all the stuff online, iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, but it's even better to bring that all in person and build real relationships within the community. And that's what the Vancouver Real Meetup is really all about. In fact, today we have a really special guest. We have Carlos with us today, and I'm going to flip the camera over to Carlos really quick. And Carlos, when did we meet for the first time?
Oh man, probably over a year ago.
Over a year ago, yeah. And it's been really cool to see how people have kind of come out of the work, like yourself and Candice and Nicola. Mm-hmm. And now we have people that are literally volunteering their time to be in and around the community and just help grow the podcast, which is amazing. And you're also the link between us and our guest today, which is even better.
That's right.
So why don't you tell the people about yourself a little bit?
Sure, a little brief introduction. My name is Carlos Nunez. I am a psychiatrist. I practice here in Vancouver. I wear lots of hats, but I primarily work out of St. Paul's Hospital. It's a teaching facility, so I'm also a clinical faculty over at the University of British Columbia. I am a husband and father to 2 young boys, and I dedicate some of my time here to Vancouver Real, to the community and the personal development aspect that we're starting. So I'm really happy to be a part of this interview, and thank you very much for having me here too.
Well, thanks for being here. And you're a very high caliber individual, and we seem to be attracting people of high caliber. So maybe we're doing something right.
I believe you are.
Very cool.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, thank you for all the support you've had over the time we've been working together. I really appreciate it as an official thank you. And lastly, we'll put a little plug out for Omega Point YouTube channel. Omega Point is our brother Omid Pakman's channel, who helps us behind the scenes here at Vancouver Real with the video editing and putting the audio, making it sound excellent for you while you're listening to these episodes wherever you may be. So go check out Omega Point on YouTube and Facebook, and you can see Omid's latest and greatest creations. And I believe he's got a really cool one. He says it's his most impressive one yet, that he's working with Jason Silva for his shots of awe. So check out Omega Point on YouTube. And enough of the fluff. Not that you're fluff.
Sorry,
Carlos is not
problem.
fluff.
Yeah, Carlos, that was impressive, man.
Yeah.
Damn, you're pretty smart.
Yeah,
I know, eh?
I mean, you didn't tell me all that.
Yeah, he's a humble guy.
Yeah.
Which is even more noble in my mind. But today we are very happy and very honored to have with us Steve Maxwell. And I'm just going to spout this off a little bit, but we'll get more into your accolades and just your experience in general. And Steve is an American fitness coach, physical educator, and jiu-jitsu instructor. He's been named one of the top 100 trainers in the United States by Men's Journal. You've appeared on the Joe Rogan podcast several times, London Real a couple times now. Obviously, we're affiliate with London Real. And I've personally really enjoyed I've listened to pretty much all your episodes over the years because I've just listened to his podcast for a long time. Just your philosophies, your approach to life, let alone your expertise in physical education, jiu-jitsu. You've been fortunate to be training with some of the founders of jiu-jitsu, the godfathers of jiu-jitsu. But long-winded, Steve Maxwell, welcome to Vancouver Real.
Hey, thanks a lot. I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. So you came into town last week. You're here for seminars. That's kind of what you do as a part of this nomadic lifestyle that you live, which is a very curious topic. But tell us a little bit about, I think, what you're doing now. But I want to dive deeper into your story a little bit because it is fascinating. So what are you in town for, and what are your kind of day-to-day, and what's your life looking like right now?
Well, Carlos contacted me and helped me set up 3 different seminars. Actually, 4.
Nice.
Because this weekend will be a twofer. There'll be some
double
mobility.
whammy.
Yeah, double whammy. Some good old Gracie Jiu-Jitsu self-defense,
Cool.
along with the mobility conditioning. So that'll be this weekend, this Saturday. I taught a mobility seminar and a bodyweight strength training seminar. Being on the road as much as I am, I've pretty much gone equipment-free type workouts just because it's convenient. And I decided that I wanted to not be dependent upon equipment to get a good training session. So I've come up with some pretty interesting ideas on how to use just your body. So that you can, pretty much any time, any place, anywhere.
Very cool. And because you've come from a background of, athletics, collegiate wrestling. You can tell by the ears. You got cauliflower ears going.
Good old cauliflower.
Yeah. And the fitness industry as well. You've been a trainer and you've owned gyms for years and a long time. So you've been around like just health and wellness and training and fitness for a long time. And that's my background personally. Before I got into all this, I did a master's of human kinetics at UBC and specialized all towards strength and conditioning. And I did that for a little bit, peaking with a year with a CFL team, which is a Canadian Football League here. Kind of fell out of that personally. I lost a little bit of passion for it. I mean, I still use it in my personal life. But so it's really cool for me to sit down with someone like yourself who's been in it for, really 50 years now.
It's been a long time. I started out in the 60s as a young boy in a little town called Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Carlisle.
I know Carlisle.
This was at the beginning stages of like maybe the obesity epidemic in the United States. And I was getting a little soft. My father,
were getting soft?
Yeah, I was, growing up in the bourgeois, type neighborhood, I was kind of getting my butt handed to me by some of the neighborhood toughs. And my father, being an ex-Navy boxer, he didn't like what he was saying. And he thought, well, we got to kind of man this kid up, toughen him up a little bit.
Okay.
So he tried to teach my brother and I. My brother was like a year younger than myself. I tried to teach us boxing, and I found I didn't really like it. But what I was pretty good at right from the beginning was wrestling. And so he got me going out for the wrestling team. And then I just became really obsessed with grappling, wrestling, conditioning. And so I was very motivated, 11 and 12-year-old boy.
Cool. Very early on.
Yeah, very early on. This is, I guess, mid-'60s USA. And then later was a health and physical education major at Westchester State Teachers College, which is a university now. And wrestled Division I NCAA for 4 years. And then after graduating, got a teaching job and was coaching wrestling for a brief while. When I realized I don't really like working with kids that much. It's really hard.
Yeah.
I love coaching.
Right.
I love working as a PE teacher, but the health classes and so forth, the classroom stuff that is also a requirement, I just really didn't like it at all.
Yeah.
It's just really tough working with kids. It's just, especially this was like the suburbs of the Philadelphia area.
Okay.
Pretty tough group of kids, man.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So I had always been working in the fitness industry part-time. I had my first job in the fitness industry in 1970 as an undergrad at Westchester, just a part-time job. That was in the old Nautilus fitness.
Sure.
Back when Arthur Jones and the high-intensity training model was, pretty popular. Back and the heyday of Mike Menser and some of these guys. Miami Dolphins, the only undefeated team to win a Super Bowl, Nautilus trained athletes, So people that say the machines don't work or they're not for that, no. It all works.
Yeah.
It all works.
Sure.
And so since I had a little taste of that, I realized, wow, I really like working in the gym business. But the fitness industry didn't even exist back then. I mean, there was gyms.
Right.
But there was mostly hardcore bodybuilding, some physical culture type stuff. Like Gold's out in, you see the old pictures of Arnold and Franco, those type of hardcore bodybuilding gyms. Vic Tanny had a chain of gyms. But there wasn't really that much going on until Jones came along and there was an explosion of these Nautilus gyms.
Can I time and dive right there? Because we've kind of talked about this in terms of our business here with floating and like when you're trying to introduce something new to people. And so, we've looked at floating and because we know it's good for you. There's research backing it, but yet, we're introducing something new to the public. And we've looked at things like yoga and probably even fitness back in that time area that you're talking about of trying to introduce people like, why should you do physical activity? People just didn't know. The education wasn't there, the ability to transfer that. So what was that kind of period like in terms of like when you're trying to introduce somebody like maybe Joe Blow to, physical education, fitness and health?
Well, it's really interesting because, my father's era, you work for a living. He was a West Virginia farm boy, and, a lot of people had physical laboring jobs.
Right.
There were office workers, obviously, and physical culture had been around since the late 1800s.
Sure.
But in my generation, literally, my brother and I used to run for preseason wrestling or football. It was not uncommon for the police to pull over and say, what are you doing? Why are you running? What did you guys do? What do you boys do?
Yeah.
We know you did something, so you might as well just fess up. What do you do?
That's funny.
So it was uncommon to see people. This was before the running revolution and so forth. But and it's also interesting because you didn't go to the gym to work out. You played sports.
Yeah.
But most young fellows, by the time they graduated high school, unless they're going on to university, that was it. Their heyday was in high school. So, you didn't see men of that era continuing to work out. But very gradually, starting right about the 70s, that whole thing started to change in the U.S. And people realized that for health and well-being, you got to train and more research started coming out. Yeah. And, of course, Arthur Jones was a huge part of that, with the whole high-intensity Nautilus training philosophy, because now people saw that they didn't have I don't have enough time as an excuse anymore, because the short, high-intensity workouts were actually quite a boon to a lot of people that basically sat behind desks all day.
Mm-hmm. Right. So there's a combination of like research coming out, supporting, and then, supporting these anecdotal cases probably at that time. That you get these people that are naturally doing it, there's odd balls probably in different parts of the country, seeing these results. Obviously, athletes as well. Training and athletics have been around. Like Nebraska, strength and conditioning is pretty famous because they were one of the earlier teams to do that kind of stuff, right? Very hard-nosed team as well. And then I guess it just kind of, so you think it just kind of started seeping into the culture in North America?
Started seeping into the culture. And, and then very short time thereafter, Jackie Sorensen kind of revolutionized women's training with the aerobic dance exercise movement.
Right.
Not that I don't have a few bones to pick with the concept, but at least you got women up and moving.
Sure.
And, that whole aerobic dance thing just spawned in, wow, it just changed everything. Then you had like high-impact aerobics, low-impact aerobics, step aerobics. They got the girls into these group exercise classes, which became pretty much the precursor to CrossFit.
Sure.
It all had its origins in the women's group exercise movement. And nowadays, you'll have the CrossFit group exercise classes, group kettlebell classes, and this type of stuff. Yeah. But it wasn't always that way. There were no group exercise classes per se. Yoga's been around for quite a while, but it was always kind of undercurrent. During the 80s, the Ashtanga yoga became extremely popular. I remember a woman by the name of Beryl Bender Bursch wrote that book, Power Yoga. And, of course, it caught a lot of people's interest. being a jiu-jitsu guy, I kind of looked at it myself because I saw yoga as a good training tool for things like jiu-jitsu and so forth. But yeah, it's interesting how it all just started to take form and come into being, and then people realized that there is some money in this, and that's just about the same era that the big box gyms started coming. Right. Big box meaning these big conglomerates, like multi-chain type.
Yeah, like a modern day one would be like LA Fitness or something like that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think what some of the names of the gyms were back in the day, but a lot of them were pretty fly by night,
Right. Yeah.
They would set up equipment and so forth and get people joining, and then like a few months later, just skip town and and set up someplace else. That was not an uncommon.
Interesting. That's interesting. Huh.
One thing's interesting about your approach in particular is you have devised a system where you don't need a gym necessarily. You can go and work out wherever you are.
Well, I can't say I just devised it. I mean, it's probably been around since time immemorial. I'm sure if we went in a time capsule and looked at the Shaolin monks or the Knights Templar, or even before that with the Spartans and so forth, people have been using bodyweight training as a primary strength tool for a really long time, specifically as related to martial arts and wrestling.
Right.
And most of what happened, most fitness is based on military needs. Why would people need to work out, right? Well, you have a professional standing army, and you need to train young men for war. That's the origins of physical education and health and training and so forth.
Right.
And it's filtered down even to this day. So, that's pretty much the origins.
Yeah. And now, in this day and age, we have people exercising for health and wellness, longevity, functional longevity, those types of notions.
You would hope, but so often it's, I want to look good. I want to look good naked, or, a lot of people are training pretty much for vanity, Yeah. But,
there's a lot of psychology. Yeah, you're right. Like that's something that I heard you speak about on London Real, and how, you kind of stated, like, you believe that a lot of people's motivation to work out on a very deep level is like just insecurities and their fear of death even, and then just the unknown and that kind of element. Can you kind of dive into that a little bit, elaborate?
Yeah, well, there's 4 major reasons why people train. One is for the very things we were just talking about, health and well-being. You got to keep the body functional, use it or lose it, right? Yeah. It's just all part of the the biologic imperative. You gotta stay functional, and if you're just sitting around and not moving too much, you're not going to be able to move around when you need to. The other reason is the vanity thing we just talked about. People want to have the buns of steel and the 8-pack and
6 not even good enough anymore. Right?
The baseball biceps, but that's a pretty small segment of the population. But women are invariably drawn to training really hard. Can't tell you as a trainer how many women would come to me that wanted to get in shape for the wedding, so they could fit in the wedding dress. It was a huge motivator.
Sure.
And then as soon as they get married, boof, that would be it. Unfortunately, not always, but a lot of times that.
Right.
And then there's sports performance. You want to enhance your performance in sport and so forth. You want to become a better athlete. But then there's a 4th subset of guys that are training just for the sake of training. They're lifting weights either as the sport. In other words, the amount of weight or number of repetitions is the goal, as opposed to using weight training, or when I say weight training, body weight is also weight training. You're using your own body weight. Yep. But they're using strength training as their goal. In other words, how much weight can I lift? How many pounds can I bench press? How much can I deadlift? How much can I Olympic snatch? How many kipping pull-ups can I do? The numbers become the motivating factor.
Right.
So they're exercising to be good at exercise. That would be your CrossFit model.
Sure.
That would be your people that compete in weightlifting.
Yeah.
The competitors. So maybe like things like Strong First, where you're doing the 5-minute snatch test.
Sure.
Or the kettlebell, the GS Sport, the Gearvik Sport, where you're doing 10-minute sets with the kettlebells. This is competitive strength training. So they're the 4 main reasons why people do it.
Right. And
it does change, by the way, as you get older.
yeah.
You may start out in one of those directions, like maybe the bodybuilding thing,
Sure.
or you wanting to put up really impressive, numbers, or to show off to your friends with the human flag, or something like that. But quickly you'll find that you are just trying to hold on to what you've built, and then eventually it just becomes just wanting to maintain your body.
Right.
I was wondering, because I have a bit of a personal question, actually. Normally, for the past few years, I've trained for functional fitness, being fit, being able to move my body. I was challenged in a group that I'm involved with to kind of bulk up, and they're like, let's all try to bulk up and see what happens. So we made this group goal just to do that, just for the exact, you could probably say vanity reasons.
Sure.
However, so I went back to how I would train when I was maybe in high school or even early university, and the past couple months, I continually getting little injuries. I tore, or not tore, but I strained my tendon by my chest, my pectoral muscle. Just today I was squatting, I pulled my hamstring, and I'm not training super intense. I'm just training how I used to train, and now I keep tweaking little things over and over. And I guess my question is, I'm 37 now. At what age do you notice that things start changing, and you probably should get away from performance and start thinking about longevity?
Well, the problem is, if you are basing your desire for training on performance, you're going to eventually become disappointed. I mean, at some point, every man is going to have to face the fact that I'm going to get smaller, weaker, the muscles are going to shrivel up.
Don't say that.
And eventually I'm going to die. That's the big fear,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of this is the fear of change and the fear of the gradual things that happen. Now, I'm not saying that you just give up, but what I am saying is you got to be smart about the way you train and realize that when you're 50, you're not going to be doing what you were when you're 20 or 30 or even 40. Man, 10 years can make a huge difference. And here's what I'd like to say to you. If you are tweaking yourself and hurting yourself, take a very good look at your form and your technique. One of the principles that I teach in all my seminars is strength training should prevent injuries, not cause. So if you are getting hurt, you may want to put the ego in check and lighten it up and use much stricter form and technique.
Yeah.
That means you may have to go a lot lighter than what you are now.
Yeah.
And forget about what you did in high school and all that.
Yeah.
Start looking at where you're at now. And you can still train hard. You can still train with intensity as long as the last rep is just as perfect as the first rep. In other words, you can train your muscles into paralysis, literally, without hurting yourself if you use perfect technique. So every rep is perfect.
Right.
So you're not throwing the weight, you're not bouncing the weight, you're not getting cheat reps.
Yeah.
That last chin up, you're not kind of bouncing and twisting just to make it, or putting a little kip in there, or a little bounce of the bar off your pecs just so you can get that last rep.
I wouldn't say I'm doing that. I'm pretty controlled overall. I'm just noticing these little things, and I was wondering, it's just age might be a factor.
It could be the exercise selection too.
Could be.
For example, at my age now, I would never think about doing barbell squats anymore.
Right.
I used to be a pretty big barbell squat enthusiast. But, once I passed that middle age barrier, 40, man, there's no way I want to put that heavy bar across my traps anymore and get that kind of shearing force in my spine. It's just,
spinal
there's
health.
so many different ways that you can get great hip, thigh, leg workouts without, subjecting yourself to this type of things.
Yeah. Definitely.
I got a question here too, actually, Steve, because since we're talking about strenuous exercise and different forms of working out, a big aspect of working out, I think that some people are aware of, others are not at all, is breath work. How you're supposed to breathe, and maybe can you talk a little bit about breathing in general and breathing during exercise? And
I've become quite the breatharian lately.
yeah,
I didn't know much about it myself, actually, until I started looking into some of the yogic systems and some of the Asian systems, the health systems like Qigong. Mm-hmm. And I noticed that breath was a very integral part. When I met the Gracies in '89 and started at the ground floor of the Jiu-Jitsu movement, I also noticed that these guys were breathing in a very particular way, and they had really good control of their breath. And you didn't hear them gulping, grunting, gasping, or anything. And the more I started to look at this, the more I started to read up on it. So I discovered a couple of different breathing systems, both yogic-based, and it seems like the Russians were doing a lot of work with this breathing thing. There was this guy, Buteyko, that developed this breathing system. Kind of controversial because he kind of went against normal medical models. So medical people don't like this guy. So but I found that a lot of the things he said made perfect sense. One of the big impressions was I read this book, Body, Mind, and Sport by John Duyard, who was an American chiropractor who also was a physician in Ayurvedic medicine.
Interesting.
And he wrote this book on how to stay calm even when you're training, and the importance of remaining calm when you train and not holding the breath involuntarily. It's a thing called Valsalva sink, very harmful, where you'll have a partial glottal closure and then you make these grunts and noises. You hear it in the gym all the time.
Right.
You hear it on the jiu-jitsu mat. It's very harmful and, according to him, life-shortening. And then this was affirmed. I actually went to the Summit of the Breath Masters in Moscow, and there was 3 Russian physicians there that were talking about these different breathing techniques as it relates to this Russian martial art called the system. In Russian, sistema, the system. And it's a whole martial art based on breath. Now, I'm a hardcore jiu-jitsu guy, but I just was curious enough about sistema to want to investigate. So I started putting together some ideas that I saw from the great Hickson Gracie and some of these yogic sources and some of the Russian sources. And I started realizing that people don't know how to breathe, and they're really dysfunctional. And they're all in upper chest, the upper lobes of the lungs, fight or flight, or shallow breathing. And no one's getting down in those lower lobes of the lungs, rest and digest, or all the calming receptors. So when people are training, they're literally putting themselves in this panic state. It's almost like the whole workout is one big panic.
Right.
You become over-adrenalized, and that adrenaline has its, you become like an adrenaline junkie.
Sure.
I've seen people in the gym that just got to get their adrenaline fix.
And I can imagine too, after the workout, you're going to remain in that more stressful state longer.
And then you crash and burn.
And just being in that more stressful state, you're going to be more catabolic for longer. And, you're already kind of hampering your recovery if you're not learning how to relax.
And the other thing too is it's a good practice if you do practice martial arts, being mindful of your breathing, even during stressful exercise. If you are in a situation, let's say in martial arts, for example, you can still remain calm even when you're, let's say, in a jiu-jitsu match or even in a self-defense situation. Because as soon as you go to the upper chest and you get in that, get the panic receptors all flared up, you end up not being able to make good decisions. Your decision-making process goes out the window. Your motor skills go right out. You can learn to control these things even in dire circumstances. So you can practice that by doing strenuous workouts in the gym and maintaining that control of your breath so that, God forbid, you would be in any kind of emergency situation. You'd be able to retain your calmness and stay cool and collected. That's one reason why in Russia they're teaching this to a lot of their special ops community. A lot of the people that I worked with were former special ops soldiers now teaching these techniques. So it's interesting stuff, man. They claim it's nothing new. They claim that there was a warrior monk society, the Russian Orthodox Christian Church, had their version of like this Chinese Shaolin monks.
Okay.
And that these were the protectors of Christendom and Mother Russia. And that these guys had a whole system of breath control and breathing and martial arts that's pretty native to Russia, that's not Asian influence at all.
I feel like that ancient wisdom, right? Like from listening to other podcasts with you on, like you definitely have an appreciation for, the time-tested wisdom that has been passed along for generation after generation. Modern science has only been around, let's say, for 150 years kind of thing. And when these traditions have been taught through generations, like there's probably going to be relevant facts and truth coming out of them just because of the stand of time, really. And things like Ayurvedic medicine, like you mentioned, like you seem to have this very open-minded, holistic approach. And I just want to kind of ask you about your angle on like, how do you incorporate it into your lifestyle currently and in your life?
Well, one reason I got really interested in the mighty men of old, I mean, there were some really badass guys back in the day, no doubt. And many of our modern athletes and so forth would have a lot of trouble keeping up. I'm sure you've read some of the studies on even just your typical paleo man and his day-to-day activity. He was like a professional athlete, These guys were, and this was just like average guys, right?
It
was just the nature of survival,
right?
Yeah.
So a lot of these guys were really something else, and of course, it's not, unlike, let's say, modern mixed martial arts of the UFC, there was no tapping out, man.
Right.
A lot of times your life depended on your skills as a fighter, as a soldier, and so forth, as a hunter. And so I was always curious about like, how do these guys do it? Even in the last century, like in the late 1800s, amazing guys. And one of the things that bothered me was, especially in modern times, a lot of the articles are written by pretty young guys who you must suspect are using performance-enhancing drugs. How would you know if they are or they're not? Some people admit it freely. A lot of people don't admit it. But you don't know because that definitely skews the system. So where are you to get pure information that isn't adulterated with any of this kind of stuff? Well, you got to go back before the 1950s and look at what these guys were doing. And you can go back in history, and the information's there.
Yeah.
Figure out like, okay, how are they training? What were they doing? What were some of their ideas? And then you start looking at all these different systems, and then you can kind of get like a read. Like you'll see similarities across the board between the different cultures and so forth. And then you start to make up your own mind, and you like as Bruce Lee said, you take what's useful and discard what isn't. And that's was my whole interest. I was just really interested from that point of view.
Cool.
What were people doing before they started using designer supplements and all this other stuff?
Right. Because they just didn't have them.
They didn't have
But yeah, they're achieving results in whatever their field was.
just
right?
normal food, man.
Yeah.
And they weren't even eating these super high protein, whey protein shake diets. And oh my God, I'm going catabolic, bro. It's been 15 minutes from my order. I got to get my BCAAs and my pre-workout shake, my post-workout. It's like,
So, yeah.
And these guys, a lot of them had jobs too.
Yeah.
Some of these guys put in hard hours, go and work out, and they were eating normal food, and they looked marvelous.
Can I get your opinion on, what's your opinion on performance enhancers and everything like that? Because so many people these days, some of the logic behind it is, well, everybody's doing it, so if I need to compete, then I need to do it. What's your philosophy around those things? Personally, I feel like it's artificial. Basically it's artificial. It's not really tapping into what humans really are. You're enhancing yourself in some way. Well, I'm just curious, and what's your take on all of that?
There's no free lunch. There is a price to be paid for all this stuff. The level which no one's really still sure. You've seen some horror stories, You read about these pro football players, that just off the top of my head, Lalo Zato, for example, was pretty famous for his PEs and so forth. But I mean, I'm talking about like professional wrestlers, actors, NFL football players, track and field athletes. It definitely has a deleterious effect on the body. But when you take this stuff, you don't know. Are you going to be one of the guys that it doesn't seem to affect? Are you going to be one of the guys that's going to have a stroke or heart attack or whatever? You don't know, and no one really knows. But it is a form of cheating. You are cheating. You're going against the laws of nature. You're trying to mess around with your hormonal levels. There's ways that you can do it naturally. I used to take a lot of supplements. I used to have a $320 a month habit in supplements.
Wow.
It's a lot of shit.
When was that?
I was swelling, man. That was in my 40s to my 50s.
Okay.
Like the 90s then?
And yeah.
So that's an expensive habit for back then.
I realized what a waste of time because the truth, I actually felt way better when I stopped all that crap. I just got brainwashed like all these other young guys. I was reading Fitness RX and Muscle Head and Power and Meatball magazine, and you start to get influenced by some of this stuff, and they're really slick with the way they advertise this. I'm not a scientist, I have a college degree in physical education and health, but I don't know about you. I can't read studies. Maybe you can.
To a degree,
it's hard to read them.
When you get down to biochemistry and stuff,
it's
that's
I don't know, good science, bad science.
To come in and
they're still hard for me too.
Are they? Okay,
good. And I think they purposely make that. And of course, the study that's touting this particular wonder supplement this month, it's completely changed. 2 months later, it's a whole new. It's just all about marketing and making money. Totally. And that's another reason I decided to go back and start looking at what were the guys doing before all this stuff. There was amazing guys. There was people that did stuff that just defies the imagination. I'll give an example. I grew up in a little town called Carlisle, Pennsylvania. It was founded on the meeting of 3 Indian trails in central Pennsylvania. It had 5 of the signers of the Declaration of Independence that lived there. It was really famous for a lot of different things. It had the United States Military College. It was an old Hessian barracks during the Revolutionary War that later became the U.S. military. But there was an Indian school, the Carlisle Indian School. And one of the illustrious students there was Jim Thorpe, who was voted as the greatest athlete of the last century. Wow. Jim, to give you an idea, now here's a guy that's just, working normal jobs, He was playing for the Carlisle Indian football team, eating normal food, right? They had a game in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and it's 18 miles away. And Jim Thorpe missed the bus. So he ran all the way to Harrisburg, made it there in time to enter into the game at the halftime, right? He made it just after the halftime and still scored 2 touchdowns.
Wow. I've heard this story before.
That's incredible.
Yeah. That's crazy.
Think about that.
Yeah.
The phenomenal combination of strength, endurance, cardio, endurance, the power, speed, to be able to do that. Now, okay, he was a phenom. Yes, he was. But I'm just saying that there was plenty of tough old guys, that World War I, World War II generations that were just living a normal food, eating normal stuff, and they weren't spending hundreds of dollars like I did at one time on worthless supplements, and they were really something else. I think you can meet your full genetic potential, whatever that may be, just eating a good healthy diet.
This is a nice segue, maybe at least in from my thoughts about just diet and nutrition in general. Before I went to med school, I was a nutrition major, and I'd love to hear maybe some of your thoughts on diet for yourself personally and just in general. Can you share some of that with us?
I've tried a lot of different stuff, over the years. I was always really interested. I had a brief stint with the vegetarianism when I was in college. I had read some things about, I was suffering a lot from injuries that I had. And I was already well on my way towards arthritis with this, super high protein diet that I was on at the time. That was the in thing. Also bulking up was the in thing, Yeah. And not exactly the healthiest thing. Just because you can doesn't mean you should. Right. And it doesn't mean any of these things are healthy or. But at any rate, over the years, I've probably read maybe 50 different things on nutrition and health and diet and so forth. What I finally settled on was this guy by the name of Dr. John Tilden. He was a turn-of-the-century American physician. And he wrote this book called Toxemia Explained. He was a doctor just at the turn of the last century when big pharmaceutical was taking over the medical industry. And he railed against this at that time. He would probably roll over in his grave because he thought it was going to be stopped. He died before, it's become what it's become.
Yeah.
Now you go to the doctor, it's all about the pill, the potion, the needle, whatever.
Hopefully that's changing a bit, but
well, I'd love to course, I haven't been to a doctor in 30 years, so I wouldn't know. But I avoid. No offense, Doc, but
I'm pumped that you're
it.
talking about this because I remember you talked about this on another podcast, and I downloaded that book and I started reading it.
It's fascinating.
Go on with it. Yeah. This is
Yeah,
really
I
cool.
mean, Dr. Tilden believed, I mean, if you read the book, he lays out a very logical approach to disease, and it all comes down to the immune system. And, we're basically digestive machines. And when our digestion is impaired by overloading it, either by eating too much or eating too often or mixing too many foods in one meal, he calls that crowded nutrition. So he was very big advocate of simplifying your meals by keeping the amount of different things in the meal to a minimum. Some people call that food combining. He found that certain things seem to digest easier together and certain things are really hard to digest. For example, the big bugaboo with children was missing starches and protein. That means you wouldn't have a cheese sandwich or pizza or a meat sandwich like a Subway hoagie. Or
sandwich, yeah.
In Philly, we call them hoagie.
Yeah, I know.
But
I went to school down in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I mean,
so.
that would be, or having rice with your chicken or something like that.
Okay.
Now, okay. He was very animate that it does differ from person to person. And, a man that is working really hard, like a hardy outdoor lumberjack kind of lifestyle, a hard-working farmer, you're outside in the fresh air, you can pretty much, live on meat and coffee and seem to do okay. And you can eat just about anything and be fine.
Right. So the activity really counterbalances whatever diet you're eating.
Activity counterbalances a lot.
Yeah.
But when your digestion gets impaired, it creates what children refer to as toxemia. You begin to develop toxins in the body. Now I've read some things about like glycated proteins and. You know what I'm talking about? You heard of the glycation theory of aging, and there's all these different theories about why we get old, but a lot of it has to do with impaired digestion. So if you keep your digestion really strong and the digestive power is good by not eating too frequently, children recommended between 4 and 5 hours, keeping your food combinations very minimum, like usually a protein in a salad or a starch in a salad or maybe a fruit-based meal, and keep it real simple, that your health would be fantastic.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's almost going back to like the whole foods diet idea, like eating real whole foods as opposed to processed and not mixing sorts together. Like if you're eating like just a piece of meat, some salad, maybe whatever, and that's it. Really,
I mean, you gotta
keep it simple, man.
Yeah,
that's what I was gonna say. Back to basically keep it simple, but like you got to think too. Like back when our bodies were evolving, they're not going to have a selection of different foods to choose from.
Oh man, you'd be lucky if you had just a mono diet, like one thing.
So like you got to think the digestion probably evolved to like, okay, I'm digesting asparagus right now, or whatever was going in, right, and not like asparagus with butter and spices from India plus this plus that, right? It probably is just harder for it to work.
Much harder to digest. And besides simplifying the foods, Tilden also was a huge advocate that if you do start to show cold symptoms, this is your body telling you that you've overloaded, that you have become toxic, so to speak. Not toxic like smog, but it's like you either suffer from what they call putrefaction, right, from proteins not digesting properly in the large intestine, or fermentation. That would be like starches or fruits. And your body actually makes these toxic chemicals, which will eventually cause you to get a cold. And if you don't take care of it, it can change into a flu or a fever. So he felt that cold germs actually are invited into the body as a way of helping you detox. That it's nature's way of helping you cleanse yourself and clean yourself out. And he advocated just resting in a dark room with the lights out and just fasting on water and just resting for a day or two, when you overload your digestive system like that. Just like a little animal does, When I used to keep pets as a child, I noticed that they go off their feed now and again. You could tell they weren't feeling so good. And they'd just lay in their little dog bed or their little bed, And then maybe like the next day, poof, they'd be up running around again, right back in their food.
Yeah.
But, what do? We say, oh, you have to eat to keep up your strength. Oh, try to eat something. The poor kid will be throwing his guts up literally with, high projectile vomiting, and mother's trying to get the chicken broth down his throat. It's like, no, let the body rest from digestion. No food. You'll feel way better.
I think there's something to that. And digestion takes up a huge amount of energy. We know that much for sure.
A lot of energy.
So if your body's constantly digesting tons of food, I mean, you're pulling energy from somewhere else in your body too, which is potentially your immune system or whatever. And now your immune system is going to be compromised, and cold gets in, and now you're sick, right?
All sorts of inflammation. You get these partially digested protein molecules crossing the blood membrane, and the next thing you know, you're getting arthritic problems in your joints.
Yeah. I'm thinking there's a lot that has to, a lot to be said also about the types of foods that people are eating that are exposed to now, right? Processed foods.
Man, Franken foods, right? Yeah. Things that never existed before in the history of man.
I mean, the amount of processed sugar we have eaten in this last century in comparison to before the Industrial Revolution is massive.
Yes, 100%.
And
the whole foods,
it is a bit of a crisis, I mean, the obesity epidemic in the U.S. is like really bad. I don't know how it is here in Canada, but
it's pretty close.
The fattest segment in the world right now is U.S. women, 48% obese.
Wow.
Not overweight.
48%.
Obese.
Wow.
I think the actual overweight is closer to 70%.
Wow.
So it's really high, and I travel full time. Yeah. I travel all over the world, so I get to see all these different segments, and I'm noticing that everyone's catching up. To give an example, I went to Iceland, I think the first time in 2004, and I just noticed that every year, at that time, by the way, I didn't really see any really obese people or anybody really fat,
Yep.
And I just noticed recently that, wow.
Getting worse everywhere.
Yeah, the kids, the younger guys, you're seeing a lot of overweight that you never saw there before at all.
Yeah.
It was like, wow, just in a few years of, all these American fast food type things, you're already starting to see it take its toll on like the younger people coming up.
Really?
Speaking of your lifestyle a little bit, so the fitness and nutrition part is definitely one part of who Steve Maxwell is and what you're about. But also, you travel constantly, and you live out of a duffel bag, from what I hear.
Pretty much. Not in it, but I sure
Not
can.
in the duffel bag, but out of.
Out of. Yeah. It wasn't always that way, by the way.
I was just curious.
I started like a lot of people as a householder. I had, the 4-story brownstone house with the garage, and,
Yeah.
and so the gym and all that. But once I scaled down, I decided that all those material things were certainly not the route to happiness. I just kept downsizing more and more to eventually I was just working out of one bag. And part of that also is just logistics, and it's just much easier when you own very little. That way you can move around a lot and not be encumbered by your personal possessions. You're not being weighed down. I can just go anywhere that there is an internet. And I make my living 3 ways. One is online coaching for fat loss and fitness programs. The other is the seminars. And then I sell video downloads, like tutorials on different exercise, whether it be like kettlebell, body weight, mobility. I'm really big into the whole mobility thing. People can buy these downloads off my website. And between those 3 sources of income, I can pretty much live anywhere I want. But it took me a while. I mean, it's not, people ask me all the time, well, how can I do this? Well, dude, I spent a lifetime setting this up and engineering it to do this. You have to, you get your name out there and people begin to recognize you as someone that knows some stuff.
Yep. Would you consider yourself a minimalist then?
Definitely. I have one 42-liter bag and then a small little carry-on bag. And that's everything I have.
And what's the biggest difference you notice from a homeowner to the way you live now, and how it's changed your life?
Well, it's a lot less stress. I live in Airbnbs and hotels, And I try to use the same hotel chain because you get these amazing upgrades. So it sounds like really expensive, and it was in the beginning, but then it gets really cheap because then you get free nights, free upgrades. You use the same airline, the same credit cards, and you get all these rewards points. And people, I don't think they'd take enough advantage of that stuff. My first 2 years, I was a real rookie, and I wasn't taking advantage. And then when I really looked at it and crunched the numbers, I thought, I'm really missing out. Because these companies, they really do give you some good rewards for using their products. So, but for me personally, it's like a huge weight was lifted off my neck and shoulders. You know, you just don't have anything to worry about but yourself.
Yeah.
Dipping into that a little deeper, like, do you have any kind of philosophical beliefs along that line, like, or spiritual beliefs even?
Associated with minimalism?
The things that you have in your life. Like,
I think that people, I mean, in America, I can speak from America point of view at least, people tend to really accumulate a lot. It's like this accumulation mindset, and it's all in the name of security. And security is like the lowest level of consciousness. It's all based on fear. Fear that you're not going to have enough. Fear that, you got to, squirrel it away for the future because, things are going to get really bad. So it's like a negative outlook right from the get-go. And with this accumulation mindset, right, of material things in your home, I mean, I've been to people's homes where literally every cupboard would just be jammed. Every closet would be crammed with clothes and boots and shoes and sporting equipment. The garage would be overrun. It would be to the point where they'd have to go get a rental locker to put even more stuff, right? It's pretty crazy. That same mindset is what's making people fat, right? They start accumulating extra flesh around their bodies. It's the same idea. It's the same mindset. It's the same consciousness, accumulation consciousness, but it's all a fear-based mentality. It's all based on the idea that the universe is limited and that there's not enough to go around, and that I got to store up extra so that I'll have enough. But I'm here to tell you that the universe always provides, but you have to have undying, unrelenting faith. And if you don't have that faith, it's not going to work. I wasn't always that way. It took a while, a lot of meditation and painful self-introspection and a lot of affirmation. I'm a huge believer in making affirmations, positive affirmations. In other words, we're constantly bombarded with these thoughts that hit our minds. Some of these thoughts are not our own. A lot of these thoughts were put in there by our parents, your mother, teachers, clergymen. A lot of times they're television advertising. The collective consciousness. You just hear things, you read things, you see things on the newscaster, and you get these voices in your mind that you're constantly plagued by. A lot of people are completely unaware of these inner conversations, but they're happening all the time. Hundreds of ideas going through your mind every minute.
What did you do to become more aware of those things?
Well, the awareness was the first step. Once I became aware of that, then I started became conscious of it. That's all about becoming a conscious person. Now I know that this exists. I know the problem exists, so that's the first step to fixing it. The second was, well, I'm not going to accept all these thoughts. I'm going to reject certain thoughts, and I'm going to hold on to certain thoughts. And to reinforce the thoughts that I want to keep and discard the thoughts that I don't want, that required the affirmation and making continual affirmations, rejecting old thoughts, and then the meditations.
Meditations.
Going, and I'm not talking about like meditating like a monk per se. You can do that. There's a lot of different techniques. I like to use a more scientific approach. I like that binaural beats. I like Kelly Howe in particular. She does this Universal Mind Meditation 1 and 2. That's my favorite. Maybe you've heard of this book, The Secret, written by U.A. Anderson, who was a spiritual master. Anyway, it's based on his work. And it's really nice. Cool. It puts you in a really good space. And you find yourself just always in the right place at the right time, doing the right thing at the right time. The people that need me most, find their way to me. The people I need most, I somehow connect to them. The things start going your way. And instead of like slogging through life, you start surfing through life. You know, life is no longer a struggle. You're just kind of like, floating along.
Yeah.
No pun.
Yeah.
So would you say it was kind of the awareness led to the consciousness of these thoughts, kind of making that shift internally in your mind, having a little bit more control over it, or this influence of like what you're going to keep in there, what you're going to reject. And then when and how, if you can explain, like did the faith start to creep in? Is it kind of when you started noticing the synchronicities, like the ease of things? Like when did the faith part, like when did you start to be like, you know what, I don't know what this is, but I am connecting to this? And like, can you kind of dive into that a little bit?
I at first became aware. Some people refer to this as mental science. There was the New Thought movement at the turn of the last century.
Is that like Ernest Holmes?
Ernest Holmes is my favorite guy, but who was the guy that wrote As a Man Thinketh? That was my first book. Okay. One of my first.
Oh, I had that book too.
And then I read After a Man Thinketh. I read Forrest Shinn. The Word is Your Wand. In other words, words are powerful. What you say, you put into action because it's almost like a vibratory pattern. And once I understood the law of attraction and the word of, the law of vibration, I realized that what you're putting out is what you're getting. I mean, a lot of the religions have talked about this, as you sow, so shall you reap. I mean, it's been in a lot of the great religions as well. And once I became aware of the whole thing, I just started over time, just monitoring more and more and more what it was I was doing. But I'll tell you that As a Man Thinketh by James Allen.
Yes.
That really made a profound influence. And I read some other things on visualization, and I had some really good manifestations almost immediately off my visualization. Visualization is basically imaging in your mind's eye future events that you would like to occur. And I manifested this awesome bicycle one time. Literally, a guy just gave it to me. It's fantastic, like $1,000 bike.
Crazy.
Yeah.
And so with that, it's because a lot of people, I think, get stuck with that law of attraction stuff in terms of like, if they just think about it, it'll come into being. Where I'm starting to learn for myself is like how much you have to like bring that vibration in, bring that feeling, like, and that's the learning I'm kind of going through, I think.
It's all about that feeling. You hit it right in the head.
Right.
You're 100% right. It's the feeling. I was missing that too. At first, I could really image it, and I could feel it. I could almost taste it, But the part of the manifestation process is generating the feeling that it's already happened. That's where the faith comes in. You have to believe it's already happened. You can't think that it's going to happen sometime in the future. You got to feel like it's right now. You ever read Eckhart Tolle, The Power of Now?
Totally.
You got to be totally in the now with that idea. But then there's a third ingredient that I was missing, that sometimes my manifestation process wasn't coming through. And that was the feeling of gratitude. I didn't realize that you have to also generate tremendous feelings of gratitude, also as if it's already happened. But on top of that, being grateful for every single thing you have, because let's say you're in a sucky situation. You got to start looking at things that you're grateful for, because if you're constantly focused on the suck, you're going to stay stuck in the suck. You're not going to be able to get out of it, man. Yeah. You're going to be limited with how well the manifestation process is going to work.
That's cool.
And so a really good book for your listeners is Rhonda Byrne. I think it's called The Power of Gratitude. No, I'm sorry. The Magic. Rhonda Byrne.
Cool.
The Magic. She was also a disciple of U.A. Anderson.
Right.
So you're a big believer in being able to like manifest your own reality, create what you want out of your life. And there's a lot of people maybe I'm lumping people into a one view, but there seems to be a lot of kind of unhappy people in general.
Very much so.
Right.
And, you always hear people say, well, what about the kid that was born like with mental deficiencies, or the guy that was born with withered legs, or like, what do you say to a guy that, has stage 3 cancer or whatever? I mean, it's harsh, but I really do believe that we all have created whatever situation we're in. And that in some cases, you have to believe now, as I do, in reincarnation and soul choice. Souls choose to enter the lives that they are meant to enter. So you have this past karma that you bring with you. I learned that. I studied a lot of Buddhism.
Right.
I've had a lot of Buddhist friends that were schooling me on this, because I could never understand that either. Well, if it's true that you can pretty much create your reality through your thinking and your thoughts and all that, how about the people in these really horrible situations that it just seems like by chance they got stuck in? And to the Buddhist philosophy, no, that wasn't by chance. It was what they needed to go through, and that their soul actually chose to go into that particular set of circumstances to learn whatever life's lessons, so that they could transmute and go on to a higher level.
And I wasn't necessarily saying like people who are in like severe like pain or something like that. I'm talking about just the general like dissatisfaction that it seems to be so prevalent, And I'm just curious, like, from if you zoom out a little bit from a societal perspective, where do you think that's all coming from?
Well, we talked about this the other day, Carlos, about kids being raised with a little bit too much self-esteem sometimes.
Yeah,
And
I remember.
trying to being made to feel that they're better than what they are, or they're, that they're deserving of some kind of praise when they're in reality they haven't really done anything yet. You see that a lot, being a former physical education teacher in the public schools and all that. I don't believe that people should have low esteem, but having this high esteem isn't necessarily the best thing either. So people are raised and kind of mollycoddled a little bit, given false expectations and so forth.
Mm-hmm. What about you think the lack of traditional rites of passages and things like that? Like,
Well, that's a huge one too, man.
like a vision quest or something.
There's nothing like that in modern society for people of European ancestry.
Right.
Nothing.
Right.
The closest thing that comes to it is maybe like the Crucible in the U.S. Marine Corps, or
Sure. Well, we were going to say before, like, we talked about going through college football, like, to a degree, like, you get challenged, you get tested, you got to have discipline, you work as a team, whatever. But, it's still.
I think there is a certain rite of passage there. Like, I actually played football at University of California, Pennsylvania, just south of Pittsburgh. Do you know where that school is?
Yeah, sure.
And I felt like there was a bit of a rite of passage for myself, especially into masculinity, because I came out of suburbs of Toronto, Ontario, and I got thrown in this environment that was a bunch of savages, really. And I had to kind of go through that whole process, and it was difficult, but I came out the other end, and it definitely added to my character and my work ethic and drive and who I am today, right? And I feel like you do get those rites of passages in certain ways, but it's not necessarily formalized, And
I think it's lacking a depth, personally. Like, it's very, I think, well documented that a lot of ex-athletes seem to do very well in corporate America, let's say, or like in terms of our terms of success in our civilization currently, of doing well in business or whatever, like, because they have that drive, that work ethic, that discipline. But I think it can lack a depth of, so why this dissatisfaction still? Where is this disconnect happening? Where are we lacking something that keeps us, finding gratitude, connecting with some level of faith? Because ultimately there is the unknown, and we're here. And so it's like, you got to trust that I'm here for a reason, kind of.
Well, a lot of people don't have any real purpose in what they're doing. Just making a living. And I mean, we were all told, you got to get your education, so you're not going to be a bum.
Yeah, step one.
And, and then you graduate and you get that job, that good salary, and then you get married, and then you buy the little house with the picket fence, and you have the 2.5 kids, and life is happily ever after, Some people refer to that as the American dream, but I think there's other countries that probably have that same concept. And that's just what you do, right? And for a lot of people, that's not very fulfilling. Just to propagate the species.
Right.
As they say, every rat, cat, and dog can have offspring. It doesn't take much to fornicate and produce offspring. So, if your whole purpose is just, making babies, and you're just overpopulating the world. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
It's not a real fulfilling thing. And people that try to live through their kids, that's not fulfilling at all, in my way of thinking. I think we all need to find ways to help our fellow man and help lift people up, and to put a voice and a message out there that can be motivating in some way.
Yeah.
And I do realize that there are people stuck in like really ordinary kind of situations, but you can do the ordinary in an extraordinary way. I mean, we've all met like really amazing people. I used to know this guy that used to do gardening, and he was like a landscape guy, and he just went around doing odd jobs. Just one of the most spiritual guys I ever met. This guy was just the most pleasant guy to be around. Very fulfilled, very happy with everything he was doing. A really good show is on Netflix. I'm thinking it was about happiness. Anyone see this show?
Maybe.
They interviewed. It was all about happiness.
Yeah.
And I think it was on Netflix.
Yeah.
They were interviewing all these different guys, and the happiest guy was the rickshaw driver.
Yeah.
Right. This in India, this guy had nothing, man. He lived in a dirt hut, but he was really happy. And the most unhappy guy was the multimillionaire Hong Kong business guy that was just hyper stressed, and he had like all the amenities, and the jets and the private cars and the high-rise penthouse and the suits, and he was the most unhappy of all. So this whole idea that you can get happiness through, making a lot of money and gathering material things, not really.
Yeah. And the funny thing is,
it's creative outlet, I think, is really what it
right.
Like that executive, right? It's a Japanese executive. That guy probably has so much desire, so much craving to go out and build and accumulate or whatever. Whereas the rickshaw driver, he's just happy as can be, driving his little rickshaw around, very little stress, in acceptance of what his life is. But it's like the exec, who's a super driven, most likely kind of guy, is always like craving and striving for more to fill something inside of him. So it almost is self-explanatory why that guy is not as happy, because he's just not fulfilled and he's looking for it externally.
Well, that's it. You just said it. It's looking externally. The whole secret is it's already there. You already are complete. You don't have to add to yourself. You don't have to keep adding by money or jobs or materialism. Or some people collect experiences like you would, they're chronically traveling, but for the experience,
right.
Because they're always trying to find something outside themselves in order to find some type of fulfillment. When in reality, it's there all the while. You are a complete unit unto yourself. Your higher self, your spirit, whatever you want to call it, is absolutely complete. I think Eckhart Tolle talked about that really, really well.
Yeah.
It's going outside yourself chronically. And, everyone was sold a bill of goods in modern U.S. society, that it's always outside, more, more, more.
And I don't know if you want to go down this path too much right now, but since I have you here, make America great again. This is like the tagline of,
I will admit, I was kind of a secret Trump supporter.
Yeah.
For one reason, selfish reason, 100%. I go to Russia a lot.
So you want some good relations over
I
there,
knew
just
that
in case.
if Clinton got in there, things would be really rancors between the Russia and the U.S. I like going to Russia. I like Russian people.
Yeah.
I trained martial arts there. It's going to be way easier for me getting in and out of that country. So that was real selfish. But like I told my son, who lives in Philly, and they were a real Clinton's hotbed of support. I said, he was really upset. I said, Zach, your day-to-day life isn't going to change one iota. It didn't matter, ultimately. We all can kind of control our own. I mean, I go to communist China, and things in China are really brutal. I mean, when the air pollution and, it's just awful place, right?
Yeah.
Yet there's plenty of people that are very happy there. They're self-fulfilled, that are working their lives the way they want them to be. I know a couple people, you know. I did a 4-city tour, some seminars there. So it doesn't matter. Even, it doesn't matter how repressive the culture. You can make a good life for yourself if you have the right mindset.
Yeah, and the reason I was bringing up the whole Trump thing is he does seem to be very like, he wants to fire up the economy and get that going and perpetuate that kind of lifestyle of like more and accumulation. And I wonder if that's going to just kind of seep through the culture within North America more and maybe create like that desire for more and bigger and better and chasing and that kind of thing.
I hope they buy my video download. I hope they come to my seminar. But
I mean, I'm talking about like just again, like we talked about, seeking that fulfillment outside of ourselves.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's endemic all over the world, and not just the U.S. I'm sure you find it here in Canada. Certainly, you do in the U.K. People are very,
one thing I've
down in the dumps and pretty upset with what went on there with that whole Brexit issue.
Yeah.
But what I find though in my travels all over, people are more alike than they are different, and that despite our cultural differences and so forth, people just want a good life for themselves. Ultimately, they do.
Yeah,
and they want peace.
Yeah, I think that kind of going inward, that mindfulness, Eckhart Tolle kind of philosophy, living in the now, is extremely prevalent in Vancouver. I feel like you fit right in Vancouver if you ever wanted to relocate or permanently locate somewhere.
Oh, it's a pretty nice little city, I'll tell you.
It's a nice place to live.
A little rainy right now, but I think I could get used to it.
But I feel like that momentum or that way of thinking, that philosophy is catching on more. At least in this city, it's definitely very prevalent. I'm just curious from your own observations in your own travel. Do you see that kind of mentality spreading, or is it not so much?
It's hard to say because, I'm traveling in a like circle. You've heard the saying, birds of a feather.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's just like, for example, we're all very fit. We all train. We hang out with other fit people. We go to gyms. Yet we're probably like less than 5% of the world's population.
Yeah.
It's predicted that like somewhere between 11 and 14% of most North Americans even train at all. Wow. Let alone seriously. Now, okay, 14%. There's millions and millions and millions of people. But we see those people every day at the gym.
Yeah.
Right? And unless you're going to a place like Walmart or
consistently. Well, it's a funny thing.
Or
we're
whatever,
surrounded.
you don't see that at other sites. So, I'm with people of a slightly, not to sound
you can say whatever you want.
Suffer from spiritual pride, but people of a higher consciousness.
Yeah, right.
Because that's the people that would be attracted to me, and that's the people that I would attract because it's the vibe I'm putting out.
Yeah,
and like you said, the one section of the town, the Walking Dead section, what was it?
Downtown East Side, just
right over
around
there.
the corner.
Yeah, okay, you know what I'm talking about. Right. Well, see, I don't see those things. I never see those things. Mm-hmm. That's why when I hear travel warnings or danger, it's like, that doesn't affect me because my consciousness is such that that's not even going to appear in my world. Yeah. My world will shield me from that. Like I said, I'll be in the right place at the right time, do the right thing at the right time because there's a power greater than myself that's leading me to do this. And you got to trust that.
It's so true what you said.
It's like Mowgli in the Jungle Book, right?
Yeah,
He was completely okay, and the animals didn't eat him because he had no fear. Innocence.
Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, when you start being around certain circles, you start assuming that circle maybe is bigger than what it really is. Like just the perfect
Pretty
example
tiny,
is the fitness culture in general. You start thinking that everyone's fit, but in reality, you said very small percentage.
You guys might be the top 1.5% right here.
Well, in terms of
all you have to do is just go to any mall, shopping mall, or any place, any movie theater, any place where people congregate for shopping, or go to a food court anywhere, in Canada.
Just do a general survey.
You can see what I'm saying, man.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I'm not exaggerating. It's
Right.
Yeah, so you can't really comment to say that consciousness is rising everywhere just because you surround yourself with conscious
you would like
people.
to think, but
Yeah.
all we can do as individuals is just to be the best self that we can be.
Yeah.
Just be the best expression of yourself that you can possibly be, so that you can sort of serve as a light.
Yep.
It doesn't. I gave up jumping on causes and all this stuff a long time ago. You just got to go internal and be the best person you can be, and then that's enough, because that will influence the people that you deal with, and that will influence the people that they deal with, and that's how that whole thing works.
Like that. Go internal.
Yeah,
Go
you
internal.
you go internal, and like we were talking about, so many of the problems I see of unhappiness and so forth, everyone's going external. You can't do it. It doesn't work. There's nothing out there. It's already inside. It's already here. And you can, that's not so easy for a person to hear, though, when they're really down in the dumps or.
It's the responsibility piece, right? It's like people they want to blame. They want to blame something else for their conditions.
Everybody wants to blame somebody or some set of circumstances or whatever,
Yeah.
But,
I'm not talking about the extreme cases either. I'm talking about you're not happy with your job or your level of fitness. There's always another reason as to why it's not good enough, and they don't want to make it, it's them doing it, They don't want to put it on them. They want to put it on someone else or something else.
Well, it's pretty shocking how quickly things can turn around, though, if you do start thinking more along these lines. It's kind of like the old saying: if you don't like the dream you're in, just dream a new dream, and you can pretty rapidly start making really good improvements in a relatively short period of time. But you got to read, you got to study, it's a discipline, just like training. You got to work with it.
Right.
It's interesting too. Why does somebody switch and somebody doesn't? What's that turning point for people? If you want to talk about Eckhart Tolle, he always says it's pain. He's like,
pain bodies.
When people has suffered enough, that's when they're going to make a change in something in their life.
Sometimes it takes rock bottom.
Right.
Yeah.
I can attest to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes, yeah. I mean, just in seeing people in therapy and, it depending on where they are in their lives or what deficits they've experienced in their lives, it's, all levels. Your average person to someone who's really destitute, but change comes from within. Absolutely. I can agree with that.
And, as a trainer, I've often had people talk about, well, I need to be motivated. It's impossible. If a person that isn't motivated from within, it's impossible for that external person to do that.
Right.
I mean, you can certainly be there to be supportive. When I ran my gym, I used to do a lot of one-on-ones, but I found that I couldn't really motivate anyone at all. Right. All I could do would be there in a supportive role.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
Just like in therapy, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
The people do their own therapy, man. You're just there to guide them through, right?
You can present the tools and guide them along, but they need to actually work with you to make the change in themselves.
What's the phrase? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make him drink.
That's
Something
right.
like that.
That's right.
But we were laughing how personal training and working with the public in that domain isn't completely dissimilar from the mental health sciences.
That's right.
Therapy, man.
Well, and that's because the mind and body aren't separate,
Nah, they're not, man.
right?
But there's so much mental aspect of the training too,
Yeah.
Boy, there's some of the things people have told me in the middle of workouts.
Oh, it's their therapy for you. You're probably like a counselor.
Like a bartender.
Right.
Bartender or hairstylist. Hairstylists get a lot of that kind of
There
stuff.
we go.
Barbers, right?
But it's true. Yeah, I bet you it just probably comes out.
Awesome.
It does. It really does. You become like an amateur psychologist, when you're dealing with these people.
Whenever
Sure.
you're working with anyone in that sort of one-on-one kind of setting, people are usually. And once you perform, start to reveal themselves in different ways or open up. Different sides of them will come out if you spend enough time with them.
You get some crazy stuff going on
I
sometimes.
bet. Yeah.
What's the craziest thing that ever happened to you as a trainer?
Oh,
Crazy, something that a client either.
Well, the one crazy thing. So this is my last year. I was working with this Canadian pro football team, And the guy that I worked with the most, who was the most kind of loyal to me, because this is what kind of got me out of the industry. I didn't really appreciate, I'm like, these are professional athletes. I was kind of a new role. The Canadian Football League is not the NFL. Let's just put that really clearly, financially, resources, all that stuff. So they brought me on in this kind of trial position, and they kind of just had me there. And the players could use me if they wanted to. I could work with them, you know. And I wasn't there to kill them. I was there to like support them, you know, injury prevention, all that kind of stuff. So the guy was the most that was really on board. He was the center. And so, you know, he worked with me pretty much every day, which is awesome in one way, shape, or form. Marwan. And it was during a game that he, like, because, you know, you get to know them, right, on a more intimate level. And it was during a game. I was also the get back coach. So I had to be getting the players back off the sideline so we wouldn't get a flag. So I was always getting the players back, and he was frustrated out of play. And so I was getting him back, and he snapped on me. Like, big time. Like, he looked like he was going to punch me.
Wow.
And
scary, because probably a pretty big guy, right?
6'3", 300 pounds probably.
Woo.
Right? So just huge. And then his fury and his pads and then that moment. And it was just super intense. And I just kind of think it was because of, like, he was able to release that kind of rage to me because I had a more intimate relationship with him because of our training relationship, you know, like, maybe it wouldn't have come out because it's like I was this familiar face. It was like your brother, like, or your siblings. You'll probably say some of the worst stuff ever to the people that are closest to you.
Well, that happens a lot too. Yeah, I was thinking more in the gym itself, you know, but yeah, I could see in the.
But it was all tied together.
Yeah, but you get some real wackos sometimes. I had a guy come to me one time that if he didn't perform well in the workout or miss a workout, he wanted me to paddle him.
What?
Swear to God.
Wow.
No, I said, nah, sorry, that doesn't work.
Did that cost extra? Just out of curiosity.
he wanted to be spanked. I swear to God. And then there was a very attractive woman that actually wanted the same thing. So I don't know what kind of thoughts I was putting out there to attract people that want to get spanked. But there, I almost thought about it for a second. You're
a good-looking guy, Steve. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, it was pretty funny though. But I mean, that's the weird stuff. But I mean, there's plenty of weird stories I could tell you in the field of training.
Yeah.
But those were two of the more bizarre situations where
Literally masochistic.
Very masochistic, man. What would you say about that, Doc?
I don't know. I don't even want to go there.
I'm sure you've gotten some masochistic.
We did a whole nother episode
We'll
on that
save
stuff.
that for another
That
talk.
would be another one, right?
Yeah.
Well, you know, my name is Steve Maxwell, and my initials are S&M. So.
There you go.
Subconsciously, you're putting it out there.
Subconsciously, I might have been.
Yeah, they literally put in their planner training with S&M.
Over 42 years, though, I've been in the
You're
field.
planting
I could
seeds.
write some really interesting books. And, you know, just some of the weird, wacky situations you run into.
Imagine. Yeah.
Just, you know, people will tell you the craziest things.
Right.
I've had people come to me high on cocaine. I mean, just blasted out of their mind, you know.
Wow.
Or, you know, you'd have to send them home.
Actually,
Guys,
You look
I
at
was
them
going to ask you a
and
question.
you see their eyes and say, "You're high. Get out of here, man. Come back when you're straight."
yeah.
So you were on Rogan a couple times, once, twice?
I think 3 times.
Three times.
Maybe was
3
it
times?
4? 3 or 4, I think.
How was your
Maybe 3.
How was your experience on the podcast? Like, how was being interviewed by him? Because in a way, like, he definitely inspired us in a lot in our life to do a podcast and even to get into the float business and all that stuff.
Well, he's a really interesting character. I had been to his house a couple of times. He had me there to do some training for him.
Yeah.
And I really had a good time. I got along with him quite well. He is a super intelligent guy, really smart, and very.
He seems
funny.
like it.
I've seen his stand-up act. He gave me tickets to a show in Toronto one time, a few years back.
Yeah.
God, it was hilarious. Very cerebral comedy.
Right.
I mean, it's not. You know, he gets a little raunchy, but it's not. It's pretty high-level stuff. It's not like lowbrow.
Yeah, you have to be somewhat with it to understand his comedy.
He was
comedy,
getting into
right?
some pretty, you know, like etheric stuff. It was kind of fun, you know.
Yeah, and evolutionary stuff.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
So you've been on his podcast 3 times, and
Yeah.
like I'm just curious. 'Cause I see the podcast Rogan, I see the stand-up Rogan, I see the UFC,
Well,
but I don't really see.
he's a real manly man. I'll tell you. You know, he loves
Strong guy,
going
eh?
bow hunting. He's massively strong, good athlete. Probably could have been a good MMA fighter himself had it come around in his younger days. I was 38 when I first started jiu-jitsu. This was 1989. And the first UFC was 93. I was an original investor in that. I was with the Gracies. Rorion Gracie, Royce's older brother, came up with that whole concept of the Ultimate Fight Championship. And I and my then wife at the time, DC Maxwell, threw our money in there along with a bunch of other people. And Rorion got that whole thing started on a shoestring.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool.
And
Imagine you stuck it out for a few years.
well, I wish I would have kept it like a little percentage of it.
Yeah.
I mean, it'd be worth a lot of money. I'm sure Horion's thinking that too, man.
Yeah.
I just saw him in L.A. I just had a lesson with him before I came here.
Cool.
Master red belt, Elliot Gracie's oldest son. We went over the knife, stick, gun defenses of jiu-jitsu.
Cool.
A lot of people don't realize that jiu-jitsu is fantastic.
Self-defense.
Martial arts.
Well, the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, and you're going to North Van Beach at Jay. That's where Mike and I trained for years. I trained with Marins. I can't believe. I've trained with him for almost 8 years. I screwed up his name, but great guy. In terms, I think you'll really resonate with him when you go up there. He's very level-headed and very, smart with his approach. And he introduced the Gracie combatives to his school just because it is an awesome self-defense system.
Well, I trained with Hiron. Hiron actually had me come in and teach part of his class.
Cool.
I had trained with his father, Hiron, who was my first martial arts instructor, by the way. He took me up through brown belt, him and Hoyce both. Cool. And then I went with the second eldest brother, Helson. But Hiron, I knew from, he was just a little boy at the time, and I can't believe what an amazing guy he's turned out to be. Such a wonderful young man. And an amazing martial arts teacher in his own right. And then we rolled together, and he was showing me some of his developments, and it was like, wow, man, this guy is so good.
Cool.
So good. So he was telling me about the young, what was the fellow's name in Vancouver?
Mark.
Yeah, I've never met him, but Hiron had nothing but high praise for this guy. So
He's awesome.
and Hiron doesn't say that just about anybody. So I figure
He's like
it's going to be really nice. I'm looking forward to it this weekend.
He's like that traditional martial arts master. He's got the honor, the respect, the spiritual side, the philosophy, the humility. Yet he is amazing at what he does.
Yeah, well, it's important to have all those things.
Totally.
I think,
And just as a side little factoid, were you the first North American or first American to receive a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
Not the first. The Machados had actually given it out. I think a couple black belts.
Okay.
I was early on the list.
Sure.
I think Craig Kukoc might have been the very first Gracie black belt in the United States. I was definitely one of the very early guys in that very beginning
top 20?
era, at least.
Ish? Yeah.
Yeah,
cool.
maybe. I was definitely Helson Gracie's first black belt.
Cool.
He was the second eldest son of Elio Gracie. Elio, being, for your listeners that might not know, was the little Brazilian guy, one of 5 brothers that had learned from this Japanese immigrant, Maeda. At any rate, Elio was the one that is credited largely with converting Japanese jiu-jitsu into Brazilian jiu-jitsu.
Yes. Yeah.
And I trained with his son. So his second son, Helson, I was his first black belt.
Cool.
Wow.
And he had never given a black belt in North America. So I felt pretty honored.
It's a pretty direct lineage.
Yeah, I was very lucky. I was always very lucky to have really good mentors in many of the things I was interested in. When I really got interested, I got keenly interested, and I would seek out the best that I could. And I was willing to put the time and money and travel to seek these people out.
Cool.
So, yeah, I feel very, speaking of gratitude, great gratitude for the teachers and mentors. An education that would be unparalleled. I can't imagine.
Cool. Well, I can imagine a lot of people, can express the same about yourself. It's really cool that you're making yourself as available as you do with your chosen lifestyle, this nomadic lifestyle of traveling all around the world and giving these seminars and just, connecting with people in real person, going to their country. Like a lot of these people probably they couldn't come to America. They couldn't come and see you or another mentor or someone of that caliber or someone with your experience. So I think it's really cool that you're going around and making yourself available to countries that they wouldn't have a chance.
Well, I do enjoy the travel. I mean, it is somewhat adventuresome. Yeah. And I always had that bug, even when I was younger, Once I opened up my gym Maxercise in 1990, I ran the first jiu-jitsu school in the Eastern Seaboard, and it was it was called Maxercise, the gym, and I ran that for almost 17 years with my ex-wife, and you kind of get stuck, once you open up a brick and mortar business like that. You can't go anywhere.
Yeah.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
Besides teaching jiu-jitsu and doing personal training, I wasn't able to get anywhere. And then after I got divorced and sold the business, then I was pretty much free. And I realized that ideas and knowledge are power, and people are willing to pay for these things. So once I figured that out and just got everything down to that one bag, I was able to just pretty much go. Mm-hmm. But I do tell people, not everyone likes to travel. Right. And, the extreme minimalism that I'm doing isn't for everyone. I don't advocate that everyone just get rid of everything they own and just go out on the road. But I would say this, I think everyone has waste in their life. They waste a lot of stuff or they have a lot of excess accumulation. So I would encourage anyone just to go through their drawers, their bureaus, and their closets, their attic and their garage, and look at all the stuff that they haven't used within, let's say, the last 6 months. And then just give it away to charity. Just give it away. Give it to people that need it. Or trash it. Just get rid of it. Maybe someone doesn't need your junk.
Well, it feels good, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm telling you, cleaning out like that, wow, it makes you feel so light.
Yeah.
And if you are having weight control issues and fat loss issues, it's not just about diet and exercise. There is a mindset to it too. Doctor, you could back me up on that. There's a lean mentality that goes with it. And by doing something like, cleaning out and just get rid of all the excess out of the clutter out of your daily life, you will start to think leaner.
Yeah.
And you'll just find yourself just eating less and doing more. It becomes, the mindset makes it effortless.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Gabor Mate, have you heard of Gabor Mate?
I have not.
Okay. I think you would
might have to
probably
go check
really
him out.
appreciate him, but he's always commenting on how you can't separate the person from the environment, right? So if you change the environment, you're going to change the person, which makes a lot of sense, obviously. And so that can speak very closely to why you'll see probably immediate changes of one form or another by just clearing out the crap.
Well, it's funny too. You just saying that just reminded me of something. I can tell a lot about a person just looking at the way they keep, let's say, their bedroom, like messy, right? Unmade bed and all that,
right?
Messy room, cluttered mind,
right?
Yeah. I have this discipline even in hotels. I will make my bed.
Yeah,
it's just all part of just the discipline of keeping orderliness in your life. Mm-hmm. Even something as simple as making a bed has become like a little ritual, kind of calming. But see, it's that mindset that just sets the whole day. Yeah. Even though there's maids and all this stuff that can come in and do it, I do it.
Right.
The ritual behind it.
It's
maybe.
the ritual behind it.
Yeah. Well, I just cleaned out my whole place and got rid of a lot of stuff, and very clear, very clutter free now. And I'm still getting used to that environment. We gave maybe 6-7 boxes of stuff away to Salvation Army, so it feels good, and I'm looking forward to just seeing how my year shapes up. And so far, man, the year's been shaping up pretty awesome because we've been having amazing podcast guests and new opportunities come up for us. And I don't know if it corresponded with me clearing out my stuff, but it's working so far. So
heck yeah, man. And didn't you notice that feeling of space?
Oh yeah. And calmness, a certain calmness too.
Sort of calmness.
Yeah.
And a kind of exhilaration and
yeah. And when I go home, I'm like, this is pretty relaxed around here.
Neat.
I don't have to go deal with those things over there or whatever,
Yeah, the things start to own you.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, it's interesting we got into that because it works. Give it a shot.
It really does. And like I say, you don't have to become, as quite as extreme as myself. But I think if everyone out there would just go ahead and go through the wardrobes and the mass accumulation,
Closets.
you're gonna feel a lot better.
Yeah.
Life is just gonna seem lighter somehow. You know.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. This is one of those podcasts. I could double up. I could go for another hour and a half. No problem.
Yeah.
Do you know Daniele Bolelli?
I don't.
Oh, he's been on Rogan a bunch of times.
People here. I'll have to go check your past podcasts.
Yeah. He was on Rogan like a whole host of times, but yeah, it's just like I'm like all the Rogan guests. They want to go deep into conversation. You know, we can just keep going with this one.
Yeah.
You know.
I was going to ask before we wrap it up, though. Have you ever tried floating?
I have, and I liked it.
Okay.
It was quite nice. I was trying to think where I did it. I just remember it was like really an amazing experience.
Cool. Very cool.
Yeah, I could. It was complete sensory deprivation, like being in the amniotic fluid in the womb, and I could hear my own heart.
Yeah.
That was pretty wild.
Yeah.
It gets so quiet, you hear your own heart. That's a hard thing to do.
Yeah. It's basically, it's a great tool to redirect the awareness from external to internal because it literally takes away the external, and all you got left is you.
And I'm really surprised that at first I didn't think I was going to like it. I thought, oh, is this going to be claustrophobic? And the salt water, it just didn't sound inviting somehow. It couldn't be anything further from the truth, man.
Cool.
Yeah,
cool.
you just lay in there and you just go into a different universe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Pretty
You go
wild,
within.
man. So I would recommend people try it.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Yeah.
Well, this is epic. This is a fantastic podcast.
Yeah, I really appreciate your time.
Hey, thanks for having me on, man. I'd like to get my message out there.
And for the folks out there, it is maxwellsc.com. That's his website. You can check out, see those videos, his blog, where he's going, the events, all the seminars. He's been on lots of other podcasts as well. So if this is your first time chatting or hearing from Steve, go check out London Real and Joe Rogan for sure. I know you've been on those several times, both. So check out those as well because you cover a lot of different stuff on all those podcasts. That's one of the things I've always been really interested about, attracted to you about is just your breadth and how you like you kind of said, you take a little bit from everything and incorporate it into what works for you. And it's been fascinating. You got a lot of wisdom and knowledge to pass along, so I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
And next time you're in Vancouver, come in the summertime.
Yeah, man. Next time.
Yep.
Cool.
Carl has helped me set this up this year, but
We'll do it again for sure
we'll do
in the
it again.
summer.
We'll make sure that.
We'll go for a hike.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, folks. Well, thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode or any other episode of Vancouver Real, please give us a like or a share online. Tweet it, share,
subscribe,
Facebook, subscribe,
review, ratings.
And if you're in the area, come out to the meetups and meet Andy, Carlos, and myself. And we're usually there. And it's really fun to connect with the community face to face versus just us talking. So come on out when you get the chance on the Facebook group page.
Any last words?
No, I'm just grateful for Steve coming out and for you guys inviting me here to take part in this.
Well, I'm really, it's cool to bring you in and have you here. So maybe we can do it more often.
Hey, that sounds great.
Cool.
I'm up for it.
All righty. Till next time.
To whatever is.
To whatever is.